Get ready for a dynamic episode of Features Talk, the one and only podcast made to bring the tech to the streets to shed light on how the new era of automation is changing the roles of drivers and passengers today. Lisa Bailey, the founder of FeaturesFirst Auto and co-host product specialist Luke Verseput, will discuss how today is no longer just about the art of keeping up with the trends. Safety is a priority. While one can appreciate the luxurious experience cars can provide, when it comes to interacting, connecting, and co-piloting with automated technology, full understanding is needed. Whether you are an early adopter, car enthusiast, parent, or concerned citizen, this is the podcast for you. You will gain deeper knowledge on the technology at work in your car that provides you a safer driving experience, gain insights on your role as a driver or passenger in the new era of automation, and hear actionable advice and solutions when you listen to Features Talk. Here's your host, Lisa Bailey.
Hello, community. We are here again on another episode of the FeaturesTalk Podcast, the podcast that is bringing the tech to the streets to simplify the information in this new era of automation. And so I am so excited to be here for episode number 3. I can't even believe we're already here at episode number 3. And I'm super excited to have my co-host, Luke Verseput, our guru car specialist, who gets to sit next to me and I get to pick his brain about the technology in cars. And that is literally what he does on a daily basis. He is connecting the drivers to technology in cars. So we are so grateful to have you a part of our community and our team. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. Yes. I am going to give you a few minutes, Luke, to go ahead and introduce yourself and say hi to the community.
Yeah. So I'm Luke. If this is your first one watching, well, I didn't think about it earlier. With episode 3, that time sure flew by, didn't it?
Didn't it?
Yeah. So my name's Luke. I'm a product specialist for Kia. So my job on the daily, kind of like what Lisa mentioned, is just essentially connecting customers with features of the car. I work at Citrus Kia in Ontario, part of Citrus Motors at the Ontario Auto Center. And my whole job as a product specialist is just to show the features of the car and show what cars have, what they don't have, what fits for certain people's needs, what for their certain lifestyles, anything like that, right? So it's just kind of helping them navigate the jungle, I guess you could say, of modern car technology.
I, for one, can appreciate that. That's how I met you, right, Luke? Yeah. When I purchased my Kia Optima Hybrid, I purchased a computer and I thankfully had a product specialist there to explain the features that were in my vehicle. And I realized the whole community needs this experience. And so what a way for us to be able to bring this conversation on a larger platform. So I'm so excited. Thank you for joining me today for episode number 3, where we are going to be talking about the rise of EVs, electric vehicles. We are finally at the conversation that is a hot topic in the auto industry today, really, is electric vehicles and the future of electric vehicles. And that kind of, brings me to the beginning of our conversation of talking about the rise of electric vehicles and why is electric vehicles the future. You can find pros and cons in everything, right? And I know that there are cons that comes to imagining a world that's fully electrical when it comes to vehicles and in transportation. And then there are pros as well. And if you really can think about the climate crisis that we are in right now and that we have experienced really tremendously this year, last year, 2020, and really looking at 2021 as a whole globally. What can we do better in every industry that will reduce our carbon print, that would treat, quote unquote, Mother Earth just a little bit better? And so when we think about transportation in the auto industry, electric vehicles are their efforts of reducing their carbon print in the world. And so from my perspective as a driver, having a hybrid and knowing that my next step is adopting an electric vehicle, I feel good about what I'm doing for the earth. I feel good about the decision that I'm making, reducing my carbon print and teaching my children that this is something that you can do as a person, as a concerned citizen of the world, as someone who cares about the earth that you live in. owning an electric vehicle can be an expression of yours that reduces your carbon print. So, coming from that perspective, Luke, what are your thoughts about why electric vehicles from a product specialist are the future? And not necessarily the whole future. We know that we're going into autonomous eventually down the line, but electric vehicles really are the next step into this whole process. Working at a dealership as a product specialist, seeing how, especially in California, right? Seeing how that executive order by the governor, how he has already said after 2035, I believe, the car dealerships will not be selling any more gas emission vehicles. And so someone who's working at the dealerships, knowing that electric vehicles are the future of sales, they are the future of exactly how we're going to be transporting ourselves. Why would you say, as a product specialist, electric vehicles are the future, really to reduce our carbon print and to do more and to do better in the earth?
The biggest difference with EVs is that there's no emission.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what everyone talks about with gas engine vehicles is the emissions, right? The harmful gases that are emitted from, exhaust pipes. And I'm sure everyone's probably seen on the road at least once. You see even like big commercial vehicles like buses or things like that. How often have you seen a bus that says, powered by clean natural gas?
Right.
Or clean air vehicle, right? It's, part of that's just, marketing to, to create positive mind share over whatever brand that bus is. But also that's kind of what they're getting at is that, in the meantime, before there's fully electric, vehicles on that scale, it's about, reducing the emissions of gases and things like that from cars. And from an ecological standpoint, from preserving, the kind of the natural environment that we have, that's the biggest thing. And that's kind of one of the biggest challenges of EVs is that they eliminate, if you're looking at a specific car or going from a specific car to another, if you're going from a gas engine vehicle to a fully electric vehicle, you're not eliminating carbon footprint, but you're reducing any kind of harmful gas emission. But then there's a whole other side to EVs, which is something that I hope the automotive industry and humanity as a whole doesn't get, kind of bitten in the back too hard by down the road, which is what about the batteries themselves in EVs? How do those get recycled? And the thing is, with batteries, they're really complex things. Lithium ion batteries are what most EVs use. Less than 5% of batteries are actually recycled. And so the problem is, looking at specific numbers or statistics or not, it's difficult to recycle batteries. And so that's going to be one of the interesting things moving forward is how does the automotive industry deal with spent batteries? Because batteries don't last forever. So in the meantime, getting more EVs on the road is going to mean cleaner air. It's also going to mean things being quieter. So that's kind of the other big side of this is there's the ecological standpoint of which is, what's better for the environment around us, but then also just the human aspect of, how tolerable are cars? One of my favorite automotive journalists, anyone who's seen Top Gear, the old British show Top Gear will know James May, one of the three hosts of Top Gear. And he was asked, what's your least favorite thing about cars? And someone whose career has been through on car journalism, he was asked, what's your least favorite thing about cars? He goes, to be honest, my biggest problem with cars is that they're clutter.
Yeah.
Like they're useful when you use them, but other than that, they just, they're just
take up
big.
Space.
They take up a lot of space. They make a lot of noise, and some cars are engineered to make really fantastic noises in their engines. But as in a public, in most people's day to day, even the very prices of housing are determined by how loud the streets are nearby.
Yeah.
And so
very true. Very true.
Electric vehicles, it's going to be quieter also because they won't be silent. There's actually U.S. legislation stating that electric cars cannot be silent.
Wow.
But for specific reasons we can get into a little later when we get to the safety aspect of all this. But overall, those are kind of the two big things of how EVs will be the future.
Yeah.
In that way that you mentioned. Yeah. Ecologically, it'll mean cleaner air. And then, human, as far as the human element, there are benefits like lower noise and potentially better ride comfort that can come with EVs.
Yeah. And I completely agree. There's so many aspects that you could talk about the benefits with electric vehicles really being implemented more in the transportation industry, but there's also the issues or the risks that have to be associated with them as well. Talking about what you brought up with the recycling of the batteries. And that's the good thing about understanding process and improvement, right? That's the whole point of FeaturesFirst Auto here, is to say, listen, these are technologies that are coming to you that will be presented to you to engage, connect, interact, and we want to reduce that risk, And so as technologies change, as they integrate, as they update, we update our community so we are ready. The automotive industry is doing the same process with electric vehicles. They're rolling out, they're considering risk, and they're trying to mitigate that risk as much as possible, which speaks about the big infrastructure that is needed to even pull this whole zero emissions vision and make it a reality. I mean, the electrical companies thinking about the charging stations that will need to be built. And so there's a lot of decision making around EVs, and a lot of people have a lot to say. And even one of the questions that we received from our community member is, when will EVs take over? And I think that's a really cool question, because if you think about it, many people say, well, EVs are here now and they're here to stay. And so to that point, we really like to look at the market. We like to look at the automotive industry. What is happening? What is happening in our government? What is happening in legislation? And what are they saying about electric vehicles? And if you look at it, we talked a little bit about it earlier. The governor of California made his announcement in 2020 that after 2035, all new cars, passenger trucks sold in California will be zero emission vehicles. And so, and I know for sure many states are following that same standard. And so I would say, considering that information, EVs are not, I wouldn't say they're necessarily taking over, but they are going to be regulated. And so they're going to be somewhat required of you to participate with this, the zero emissions future. And so I would say to our community, continue to educate yourself, continue listening and tuning into our podcast when we're talking about these electric vehicles and what your role, your responsibility is as a driver, and your awareness as to shopping for a new electric vehicle. What is your lifestyle going to look like? What is your responsibilities as a driver going to look like? And so we're going to transition into just the safety aspect of electric vehicles now. And thinking about the question, automatic, right? We're talking about automation, we're talking about artificial intelligence, and we're talking about the technologies that are being integrated into vehicles. And when we think about electric vehicles, what safety technology is at work in electric vehicles? Because we've been talking about gas emission vehicles, lane keep assist, ABS, all of these wonderful things that are helping us, smart cruise control. Are these safety features in electric vehicles as well? And are the safety benefits increasing? Luke, as a product specialist, how would you communicate the safety technology that is working in electric vehicles and the evolution maybe of safety as electric vehicles are using that technology?
Well, to someone shopping for one, I think one of the important things is to indicate that there will be some familiarity with, gas engine vehicles that the person's probably used to. I mean, you said it a second ago that, a lot of the same safety features that we see in most gas cars, in most normal cars now, those are going to be in electric vehicles, and they're going to function pretty much the same way.
Yeah.
It's so that'll be pretty familiar. But then what will be coming down the pipeline essentially are going to be some more advanced versions of our already known safety features. Some of which we're already seeing. I mean, most people know about Tesla Autopilot. A lot has been made about Tesla Autopilot, and it can self-drive the car.
Yeah.
Almost an equal amount has been made about people getting in accidents from using the system.
Yes.
Which usually tends to be like, user error of like, turn on autopilot and then sit in the back seat. Like, no.
Exactly.
Yes. We touched on that in the last episode, right? Like electric vehicle or not, the number one safety feature is to be a safe driver, and don't be foolish. But
exactly.
But it'll essentially a more advanced automatic cruise control with stop and go. That will be an easier thing, maybe not easier, but it'll be a more practical thing to implement with EVs, because it's it's all going to function as essentially one computer. I mean, you referred to your Optima as a computer, and that's your Optima is already a couple of years old already.
I know. I'm telling you, it's a 2020. And so
2020, yeah. So like 1 year old.
Yeah. So it's 1 year old. But if you think about technology, and I mean, there are features that are not even in my vehicle that I have not even interacted with that I know that are out there in other vehicles. And so way more advanced. But there's one thing that you said that I really want to drive home to our community. When people think about purchasing an electric vehicle and switching, that behavior change just because of the unknown, they're nervous to do it. And knowing that the car is going to behave the same way, essentially, when it comes to protecting you with all of the safety features, that is a good thing to know as a driver. It kind of eases your mind when you're thinking about even just starting the process of looking to own one or to lease one, or which questions that you should be asking. So that's really nice as a driver to know that, okay, my experience in looking for an electric vehicle may not be that different than me having a gas emissions vehicle. Obviously, there are big changes. There are pretty clear differences. But as far as how the vehicle will operate and you getting in, looking at your dashboard, it's nice to know that you won't be met with something completely brand new.
Right.
Mentioning some of the safety features that are in electric vehicles: headlights, automatic braking, lane keep assist, forward collision avoidance assist. What would you say to our community who are starting to beginning to think to look at an EV and purchase an EV, lease an EV? When they're thinking about safety features, should they be looking at certain ones?
Well, I would say, I mean, any safety feature would be a good one to look at.
Yeah.
And the what I think will be more commonplace is that smart cruise control with automatic stop and go. I know I keep bringing that one up, but the whole thing about a fully electric vehicle is that's kind of, I don't want to say the last puzzle piece, because there are so many pieces that go into a vehicle going electric, but in a way, it's kind of the last puzzle piece of that feature really being utilized fully, isn't it? Because, electric vehicles are most likely going to have electronic parking brakes and electronically governed everything, because there's no gas. There's no traditional gas engine for the system to kind of be labored with. And so, as far as looking for a new electric vehicle, given that it almost feels interesting to say this, but given that a lot of those more like what we think of as high-tech features have become pretty commonplace. I mean, the new Kia Soul I just got has every advanced safety feature except smart cruise control. And that's a lot of safety features for a car that's, can be had for under $25,000.
Yes.
And so given that all that is going to be, I don't want to say unanimous, but with electric vehicles, it probably will be unanimous. Here's what I would say safety-wise for EVs, and this is where it kind of gets interesting. Maybe one of the biggest things you want to look at are actually crash test safety ratings. Maybe even, which kind of, I mean, in an era full of technology, and now we're talking about electric vehicles, it feels kind of interesting to say that, like, oh, here's this big new thing that you want to look at, which is what they were saying in what, like the 70s and 80s when the auto industry finally started to take crash test safety ratings like really seriously, like even before I was born, right? Like in the 70s and 80s, when the automotive industry finally started to take that stuff seriously. Forget any kind of technology features, there were none back then. It was just, whoa, we actually need to make the body of the car safe. What a thought, right? Which I know it sounds silly now, but at one point there was, in the early days of cars, that was how it was.
Yeah.
So now here we go. It's kind of cyclical, isn't it? We come around now we're talking about cars that can almost drive themselves. So given that they're probably all going to have these advanced safety features, what's the thing to look at? Crash test safety ratings.
This is very true.
Here's why. We're moving into an era of cars with no engine in front of you or behind you, and cars with no transmission in front of or behind you. And so many of these mechanical parts that have always played a part in crash test safety ratings that are no longer going to. Because think about this. If you have a car like your car or my car, right? Your Optima or my Kia Soul.
Yeah.
That one.
Yes.
what's in front of you? The engine.
Yep.
Right. That big, I mean, not a big engine in these cars, but still it's this kind of bulky engine up front and the transmission up there as well. I mean, that's a lot those are some heavy parts that are waiting to come your way in a front accident.
Yeah.
So what happens when you go to a Tesla, which would be about the same size as your Optima? There's no engine in front of you. There's whatever cargo you decided to put in your front trunk.
Yep. So now you're talking about the evolution of design.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So now it's a whole new era of cars.
Yes.
All these, the decades of crash test safety ratings and automakers bragging about all their IIHS crash test safety ratings.
Yes.
Well, which is a good thing to brag about. I mean, that's a very real thing that can make a difference. But what about a car that doesn't have most of these mechanical components?
Exactly.
Now shopping for EVs, looking to a future where your only choices will be all electric vehicles.
Yep.
It seems weird to say that the high tech safety features where the car kind of takes over for you, those are almost going to be the equalizer and the difference
engine.
And the difference maker between these cars will be the actual physical design of it.
Yes.
Whereas right now, in this very minute, we're in an age of cars where we can pretty much take for granted, for the most part, that the structural integrity of a car will be good.
Yes.
That it will work. That a car is more likely to save you than kill you in an accident. If metal were to actually crunch, you'd probably be fine.
Yep.
Right now, we can take that but mostly for granted.
Yes.
So now what's separating cars that we talked about in our first two episodes are, which one has this high-tech feature? Which one has this high-tech feature?
Yep. Yep.
Well, when all cars have that, now it's almost going to be back to the drawing board for these automakers, isn't it? What do they do to keep their cars structurally sound with no engines, but then also how do you account for a battery crunching in an accident? That's how electrical fires can happen.
And that's somewhat of what the problem was with the Tesla accident. The first responders showed up and it took them a lot longer to put that fire out. And that could be a reality. Well, that is a reality when you're dealing with these cars and these batteries. But what you were speaking about, it really just, boom, it put a light bulb, because you're talking about, and this is how you see the structure of vehicles changing. Like if you look at the future, the engineers and how they're designing vehicles, they're coming up with these odd, weird shapes of vehicles where you can have even a lounge experience in the backseat of a vehicle or the front seat of a vehicle because of this evolution. But this is exactly why policymakers right now, they are literally meeting with the thought leaders. The government is getting together with the thought leaders that are going to have to assist them in creating a solid infrastructure, addressing those questions of how does the crash safety rating test evolve now. And that's something that I didn't think about. But, as a company, we support the 5-star safety rating vehicles because they have the safety features in there. They've gone through the safety crash course tests that NHTSA makes sure basically they hold every single auto manufacturer to that standard to be able to get that, 5-star seal. And so to know that even that process, even that checkoff list will be evolved as technology evolves. And as a driver, you want to know, how is that evolving? And how am I going to feel safe, that the vehicle will not crash on me if I were to hit, something. And so there's so many aspects to it as a driver. And that's exactly why I'm so happy that we are informing our community. And we have someone like you that can tell us those things, with the crash safety test and how that is going to even evolve as well. And so that's amazing, Luke. I didn't even think about the crash safety test. Yeah.
And another thing is when they crash test cars, they crash test them with essentially a dummy engine in it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right. It's like, they don't actually turn the engine on and burn gas and have the thing going when they do those crash tests.
Wow.
They have something there that is like, it's basically the exact engine, right? Like how much it weighs, what it's all of its same metrics, so they can test how it will actually behave in the real world. But for the most part, they don't actually crash them with the engines running.
Right.
Right. So then what do you do for an EV when it's essentially, it's like this. When you crash test an EV, do you make your crash test units with essentially dummy batteries? Like some kind of thick, like a heavy thing in there that is the exact same density, weight, shape, every metric, the same as the battery. But do you not use the real battery, or do you use the real battery? Because you can rebuild an engine. You can't rebuild a lithium ion battery. If you crash one of those, it's done.
Wow.
So, and so then, if you might save a ton of money and save on a lot of logistics by putting like something that would in all ways perfectly simulate the battery of an EV, except for one thing. How do you measure the likeliness of an electrical fire?
Yeah. And I tell you, that's exactly going to be covered in a future episode as we get more and more into electric vehicles, because there's so much to talk about them.
You're listening to Features Talk, shedding light on the new era of automation. To find out more, go to www.FeaturesFirstAuto.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa Bailey.
What is the biggest change for drivers to consider when purchasing an electric vehicle? And we've touched briefly on this, and we're talking about it right now. Your level of awareness. It's the biggest change is your level of being aware of the change, and your responsibility to that change. So how you search for a vehicle, you may just look for the, 5-star safety crash rating, but knowing now that electric vehicles are progressing, how do you make sure that that 5-star safety rating is what it is? Do you have enough knowledge? Do you have enough information to make an informed decision? And so when we think about purchasing electric vehicles, I want to hear from you, because you working at a dealership, I don't know how often, the customers are coming in looking for electric vehicles, but what are some of the questions that you hear before we get into the nitty gritty of some of the changes for the drivers? What are some of the questions that you hear when people are coming in to look for electric vehicles?
Right. So I should preface this by saying that I've worked at Citrus Motors about 1 year and 8 months now, so just under 2 years. And even if I had been working here for like 6 or 7 years, there are not many EVs. Mm-hmm. Kia right now has the Niro EV, and that's it. Yeah. That's the only EV. So anything I answer to that question, I should preface by saying it is very, very seldom that we get customers coming in making any mention of EVs.
And I want to speak to that, because that kind of speaks to the reality of the need for consumers to know more, understand more, the manufacturing producing more EVs. It shows that we are at the cusp of this. The fact that Kia only has one EV right now that's on that lot, not saying that's all of their EVs, but they have that EV. To think that we are going to a reality of only selling electric vehicles, there's so much to be accomplished in the trajectory of that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. And now it's so I just wanted to preface that by saying that, in answer to your question of what do customers ask me? Yeah. I should preface by saying almost no customers ask me, because there aren't, except for that tiny niche who are looking for the Kia Niro EV. Yep. There aren't many. So given that, the most common things I hear are, the obvious: how long can it go? Yeah. Right. What's its range? About what and how much time does it take to charge? Yeah. Those kinds of things. Have not had customers ask about safety features all that much. Mm-hmm. What I've noticed is that customers ask about safety features a lot less with electric vehicles. Interesting. That doesn't come up very often. And I think part of that is people who are looking to actually embrace having an EV, I think mentally they're in a place where they are really ready to take for granted kind of what I mentioned before, that like electric vehicles are just going to have those advanced safety features. Yep. And it's like, why wouldn't they? Exactly. It would be like customers never ask me, oh, does this engine use fuel injection or does it have a carburetor? Mm-hmm. It's just known that it has fuel injection. There's no need to make carbureted engines anymore. Not for general.
Yes.
Not for the general, consumer. And I almost feel like I know that's kind of a gratuitous example, but I almost feel like that's the mindset with EVs. I feel like these customers are just kind of, they know they're going to be there. So now now what they ask about then is more the lifestyle. Like you said, it's more a lifestyle. It's not so much how will this vehicle save my life. It's more how can I live with this vehicle?
Exactly.
And so then how long does it take to charge? How long can it go on a charge? Those are the most common things I hear. Then you get some obscure questions. People who are really into the nitty-gritty, like where are the batteries manufactured, and stuff like that. And I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head. But,
yes.
There are some obscure questions they get asked. Where are the batteries manufactured? At what temperature should I store the battery or the car?
Yeah.
Which I know it sounds silly, but again,
there are questions that need to be answered.
Right. It's kind of a new era of. Think of it this way: it's a new era of car. Wouldn't it make sense that there's a new era of questions that are going to be asked? That's kind of what that is. Primarily, it's those though, and focusing on the lifestyle aspect of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Prior to purchasing the car, the questions are always how long does it take to charge and what's its range?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because though that's often the biggest deal breaker, or could be a deal breaker for a customer. Right. It's because they know this is no longer a car where in 3 minutes at a gas station, you'll have over 400 miles. In
exactly.
3 minutes. Unthinkable with any electric car currently.
Mm-hmm.
And that right there, that's it. Like, these customers, they know what their commute is. They kind of know roughly how many miles they're driving. EV customers are much more conscious of that, by the way, than the normal,
exactly.
car customers.
Uh-huh.
And so they're thinking, what's my commute? How many miles do I have to drive? So that number one question, if they don't get a good answer to how long can this go on a charge, well, that's it. Why bother asking anything else?
Exactly.
Which makes sense. You've said it yourself any number of times, Lisa. Your next car is going to be fully electric.
Yep.
And so no matter how cool the safety features or anything that really gets you fired up about a car, if it just didn't go enough miles, would it be worth asking anything else about it?
Exactly.
Right.
Because that convenience and luxury is gone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's the first question. And then also along with that, how long does it take to charge? And that gets into the kind of rabbit hole of different places to hook up an EV, which we'll get into more detail in a bit. Now, when a customer has decided that they're going to purchase, let's say they go to Citrus Motors where they test drive the Nero EV, they like it, work out the numbers, and now they've decided we're getting the Nero EV.
Yep.
Now, new questions start coming up. Because now it's starting to sink in. Oh, wait, I'm actually. Oh, this is happening. Okay. Wait, I can't pull this thing into a gas station. Oh crap! I gotta charge this thing.
Yes.
Right. And right then, you can almost see the switch flip in their head of, oh wait, this is actually real.
Yep, it's happening.
Yeah. So then these are the new questions that start coming up. The most common of these is. Then they go back to the how long does it take to charge? Because they've gotten over just can it go far enough? If yes, they get the car. Now wait, how long does it take to charge?
Yes.
And I don't know if you want me to go into deep talk about
this now,
or
talk about it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So then I guess as far as that, the charging of an electric vehicle, that can be kind of complicated, but not so bad once you get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Electric vehicles can be charged over essentially the same outlet you would charge a phone on.
Wow.
Just know that in the case of, to put this in perspective, just know that in the case of the Kia Niro EV, which on a full charge under best conditions can do about 260 miles or so.
Oh, okay.
That's under best conditions. Most users, I think, will probably see close to 250 or so. If that vehicle gets down to say 15%.
Yeah.
15% of a charge, still far enough to make it. If you're not too far from a charging station, you can make it on 15%. If you plugged it into a 110 outlet, a 110 volt outlet, like you would plug a phone into, it'll take over 70 hours to charge that thing.
Wow.
To 100%. That is days at a time. And so,
wow.
Not recommended.
Yeah.
Now, anyone who's heard anything about EVs will have heard the term 240, right? That's a number you'll hear all the time. 240 this, 240 that, 240 volt. That's what people are talking about. Now, everyone's familiar with a 240 volt in some capacity because you plug washing machines, dryers, and refrigerators into 240 volt outlets.
Okay.
They require a lot more. These like big household appliances, right? They require a lot more power, and a lot more steady power than just something like a phone that you will quickly plug in and out.
Yes.
You never, let me quickly unplug the fridge. No.
No.
Right. That's why they have these huge 240 volt outlet plugs out. They're like that big,
Yep.
Now 240 volt is the ideal charging. That's the ideal way to charge an electric vehicle. If you plug, and again, I go back to the Kia Niro EV because that's the one I really know the numbers on the best. And the Niro EV is it's a good example, I think, because it's pretty middle of the road as far as its capacity. There are electric vehicles that can't go as far, but there are electric vehicles that can go farther. So Kia Niro EV is kind of
a nice middle ground.
Kind of a good middle ground. On a 240 volt, from 15% to like 100, then it takes about 9 hours.
Wow.
And you can do that overnight. If you plug it in when you get home from work, and get enough sleep, don't stay up too late, then 9 hours can go by. You'll have a fully charged vehicle.
Exactly.
If it were to get that low. And so that's really it. And this is what I tell customers all the time. They're asking, how long does it take to charge? There's no one answer to that. It depends on where you hook it up to.
Wow.
So as far as lifestyle, that's really the number one thing is how to fit it within your lifestyle is having a 240 volt outlet that you can reliably plug into as near as possible, of course, to your place of residence, like where you sleep for the night.
Exactly. There's one thing that you mentioned about that with the lifestyle changing and thinking about the 240 volt and having the charging, being able to do it at night. If you're renting versus owning a home, even thinking about that perspective of purchasing an electric vehicle and knowing that you will need to be able to charge your vehicle at your rental house and what type of equipment would you need if you were, let's say, someone who is purchasing a vehicle and you are renting an apartment? Is there something that would need to be installed, Luke, if they were purchasing an electric vehicle, or is there something that they can purchase that they can install at home very simply and charge their vehicle?
Well, as far as 240 volt outlets, those can be installed in the home or like in a garage pretty easily.
Okay.
I mean, you can't just go and buy a kit for it off a shelf and do it yourself. But what you can do is, there are certain companies, I don't know them all off the top of my head, but
yes.
But like primarily like with your electric company, you can have a 240 volt outlet, wired to your garage because, think of how many people have refrigerators in their garage.
Exactly.
Right? And so if you had that in your garage, it just obviously you would have it, kind of set up so you wouldn't just plug it into like the wall where it's like unfinished. You don't want that.
Exactly.
But no, you can have it installed. I think Tesla even has a thing where like they, like with the purchase of a new Tesla, they'll have, they'll have someone go to your place and do like at least a free consultation of, they'll look at your garage and go, here's where I would recommend doing that. Companies are going to start adopting more services like that to kind of entice people to get more EVs. But no, it can be done pretty easily, and to have it installed.
Now, companies will have to do that because they will have to make it, not just companies, living quarters, real estate people, investors, they will have to start thinking about electric vehicles and what equipment will be needed and make it very convenient for people to be able to purchase these vehicles and charge them at home. And that's just something that I want to make sure that our community is aware of. If you're renting, do the research, talk to the owner of the rental property and let them know you're considering getting an electric vehicle. What does that mean for you? And understand what requirements. Here we are with your level of awareness, understanding what your requirement is and understanding it early. You mentioned earlier how the customers that come in and they ask for EVs, they are more conscious. And I see that as the early adopters versus the laggards, and this is what we have a saying in the FeaturesFirst Auto community, and we call all of our community members beta collaborators. And I know that people don't understand what that term means, but we're going to get it coined and we're going to let them know you are literally, you are participating and testing this technology in vehicles as it's being integrated. And so you are essentially a beta tester. If you look at it, you are beta testing these technologies and you're basically proving the safety benefits or the luxuries that they are supposed to, that they're intended to give the driver. And so we want to collaborate with technology. We want to be prepared. We want our community to be early adopters of the technology, which is why we're going the lengths of having this podcast and putting it out to a larger audience, and having you, Luke, as the co-host, bringing that technology to the streets, simplifying it, and preparing our community. And so we are making it easier for you to be more aware of what's going on so you can be prepared as a driver. And just speaking about the lifestyle changes that you will have to think about when you're looking at owning or leasing an electric vehicle, even the convenience and the ownership premiums, right? We have the government who is giving you certain tax benefits, certain tax write-offs from being an electric vehicle owner. And so understanding and knowing and being aware of those opportunities, as well as you become more aware and become an early adopter, right, of what is going on with the technologies. Luke, what else could you add briefly about the changes for the drivers and what to consider when they're purchasing an EV from, I would say, like a charging perspective, home renovations, living lifestyle?
Yeah. As there are, I admittedly haven't looked into like the exact way. Off the top of my head, I don't have a step-by-step of here is exactly what you should do from your current garage to having an EV charge set up.
Yes.
One, because we just, like I said, it is so few and far between that any customers come through looking for EVs.
Yep.
Currently, at least.
Yep.
Which will change in about 12 days, because in 12 days, Kia is unveiling their new all-electric crossover called the EV6.
Oh, wow. So you heard it here, folks, that, Kia is going to be releasing a new electric vehicle. So that means, Luke, you're going to have a lot more to say about the electric vehicles and what customers are asking. And the fact that you just got a new car, right? You just got a new Kia Soul. And so I want to know, yes, I see it right behind you. I want to know your experience. I mean, what an awesome way right now just to be able to briefly touch on the difference between what year was your car previously?
So as far as my car from what I had to what I have. So I just briefly about my car, and then I want to get back to what you were asking about, just, for, if you're having an electric car.
Yes.
So real briefly, I was driving a 2014 Toyota Tacoma, and I'm on April 27th, on my sister's birthday, funnily enough. I'll always remember that date. On April 27th, I began a lease on a new 2021 Kia Soul.
Woohoo!
And so, yeah, it's really awesome in a lot of ways. I can touch on that more. Later. But as far as the EV thing, I want to mention, like, I don't have a whole list of like exactly here's what to do.
Yeah.
It can be pricey to have like a professional electrician come in and examine your home, measure everything out, and get all that.
Right.
That can be expensive. There are, kits you can actually get where it plugs into an existing outlet, and it converts that, from like a 120 up to a 240 volt outlet, and that can go to the EV. Like I said, I haven't specifically looked into exactly what those are, how to install them. One, I don't have an electric vehicle. Two, we don't really have any customers asking about this all that often. And almost every EV customer I've talked to already has one set up.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've basically already know about that.
They've done the research and they have prepared themselves. But I tell you, there's a larger group of people that are not prepared. And that's who we are taught. That's why we're here. And we're here to help the ones that don't know and that are not prepared like them.
Right. And so the other thing I would say to consider when buying a new EV is, we've talked all this stuff about, and it's charging and stuff like that, but we haven't actually talked about driving the thing.
Exactly.
Here's the other big thing I would want people to consider. One, first of all, EVs will make it more important than ever to test drive a vehicle. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people come in there just like, all cars drive the same, I'll be fine. I know, I'm sure it'll drive fine. I just need something to get to A to B. Well, fine. I mean, that's all well and good, but what about when you're A to B? What about when going from A to B isn't going to use a gas station anymore?
Mm-hmm.
So how does it drive? Always test drive the vehicle, EV or not, always test drive. But consider there's going to be a big performance delta now between different EVs when they come out, and obviously from gas engine vehicles to electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Kia's new EV that they're going to unveil in just under 2 weeks here. It's called the EV6, and the EV6 it's like a kind of a compact crossover. Think the size of a Ford Edge, maybe Kia Sportage, and something like, we haven't seen it in person yet, but I think it's kind of like it's not a big 3-row family SUV, but it's bigger than a Kia Soul for sure.
Yeah.
Think more like maybe Toyota RAV4.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this thing's gonna pull a 0 to 60 under 4 seconds.
Wow.
And they're not pitching it as a performance car. They're pitching it as like, hey, here's this practical,
wow.
Here's this pretty practical fully electric vehicle.
Yeah.
And it'll out drag race almost any sports car you can currently buy.
Jeez.
When you look at 0 to 60s under 4 seconds, you're looking in the $100,000 to $200,000 range for cars of that high enough performance.
Wow.
And so there's going to be a big performance thing here. Consider, what kind of driving are you after?
Yes.
And to be clear, that doesn't mean that it's going to be so touchy that it'll only ever accelerate like crazy.
Yes.
But it's important to think about how different it will be to drive one. It's not going to make noises you're used to. It's not going to give you warnings that you're used to seeing. It's not going to require maintenance that you're used to doing.
Yep.
And I think that when considering a new EV, it'll be so important to test drive it with just a different set of expectations.
Yes.
Like, customers are not going to be able to test drive EVs with any metric of, which one makes less engine noise. It's just, you can't do it.
Yep.
One thing we hear from customers all the time, they're surprised that the Nero EV is so noisy inside. But you know what they're hearing? They're hearing the normal amount of road noise that they've been hearing their entire lives. There's just no engine noise to distract them from it.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah, customers have never said like, it's a terrible car. When I drive the Nero EV, I think it's plenty quiet, not luxury car quiet, but it's pretty darn quiet in there, quieter than a normal car, because there's no engine.
Yeah.
Well, customers who have been, especially if it's slightly older customers who have, cars have been that way since, like I said, more years than I've been alive.
Yeah.
As long as they've been buying cars, all of a sudden now they have a car that where the only sound you hear is noise from wind and the tires on the road.
Yep.
Wow. It's all so often when people say like, wow, it's really quiet in here, you can't really hear the road that much. Well, it's because they're hearing the engine, and you expect to hear an engine.
That's so interesting. Those changes, those small changes, even when you were speaking about the small change that happens with lane keep assist, that small little nudge in a vehicle, that small change in going from a gas to electric vehicle in the behavior and in the environment can make you more aware of something that you weren't aware of before. And so that's speaking to you, to what you're saying, Luke, is, your awareness, these changes that will be subtle, but be big at the same time. And so that is exactly why we're here. That is why FeaturesFirst Auto is here. That is why we are having these episodes and talking to wonderful car gurus like Luke. And as we are wrapping up our 3rd episode, we always end it with asking our car guru, Luke, what special tips can he give, or a tip that you can give the community based on what we talked about today? What is the one thing that you would like them to walk away with and remember from this episode?
Well, there's a lot.
I know I put you on the spot.
There's a lot to pick from, isn't there?
Yes, there is. We gave a lot of good information today.
Yeah. So I think with regards to EVs becoming, more commonplace, one tip I would give people is have a different set of expectations.
Yes.
So many people are going to have the same expectations of EVs going into EVs from normal gas cars, and which I mean is understandable. It's gas engine cars have been around for over a century, and so naturally we don't have anything else to compare them to.
Yeah.
But like I said, it'll be important. Have a different set of expectations. Don't expect, expect there to be things that are better about EVs, and expect there to be some things that are going to be some massive growing pains.
Yes.
Both on the end of both from each individual person's ownership of the car. Maybe having to change your commute, change when you drive, change what kind of trips you take. Until that gets ironed out, like those can be some real growing pains of owning an EV.
Yes.
Bigger than that, charging, the frequency of charging stations versus gas stations, it's not even close right now, or at least not yet. And so just, have a different expectations and expect certain things about it to just be, just made easier, and expect some things to be, kind of more difficult to get used to. And so my number one thing would be keep an open mind about it.
Yes.
Not everyone's enthusiastic about EVs.
Very true.
Not everyone's enthusiastic about it. And one thing we didn't get into in this episode is the rise of EVs in specific niches of the automotive community.
Yes.
In for example, in racing, in motorsports, in off-roading, in customizing vehicles, and things like that. That could be a whole. We're going to have a bunch of future EV episodes. We can touch on that later. But my number one thing would be have an open mind about EVs.
Yes. Be aware, have an open mind. And like I like to say, as the founder of Features First, this is why we have this community here. This is why we're holding our community event this year on September 14th. We are bringing together the thought leaders, and we're talking about cybersecurity. We're talking about how your car data is going to be protected as we're transitioning into this new era of automation. We're talking about education. How do you learn? How do you become aware of what your participation is as a driver and a passenger? Drivers and passengers are included in these changes. And we're also talking to the engineers. We're bringing the tech to the streets even more. We're getting further into the vision behind why these technologies are being created and how they have this big vision that they see with zero emissions and zero combustion. And so moving forward into the world, this is why we're holding our community event this year. So make sure you get your exclusive invite, and you will see me, Luke, and the entire Features First Auto team there with our all-women's panel. We're so excited to be releasing marketing materials very soon to share with the community about the event. And so we are so excited that all of you listeners have tuned in for our third episode of FeaturesTalk Podcast. And we will see you next time for episode number 4. Until then, drive safe, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at FeaturesFirst Auto, and online at www.featuresfirstauto.com to join the community and empower yourself to drive and ride safely and informed. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, drive safe.